Good afternoon from Valcour, just off Valcour Island on Route 9 south of Plattsburgh. And we're looking at a reproduction of the Philadelphia, the gunboat that was sunk just off the Valcour Island back in 1776. You're watching What's Going On here, our program. I'm Bob Venn, Calvin Castine on the camera. And look at that beautiful view out there. We don't even have to say anything. We're going to take a 30-second break here from talking and just look at that view. It doesn't need any words at all. To talk while you're looking at a scene like that is just, just doesn't need it. What a beautiful, beautiful shot here on the lake. And we're fortunate, I came across, going through some of my notes 2 nights ago, that a person by the name of Russell T. Doyle Jr. had written an article for the Clinton County Historical Association back in 1976. And I checked the phone book, and there was one, and finally, last night, about 5 of 11, I might have kept this man from going to bed. This is Russell Doyle. Good afternoon. And we said if we can get him down here, he would be a person to kind of give us some leads here and maybe even talk about his article, maybe even have him read the whole article, talking about what they found when they raised the Philadelphia in 1935. Right. And so we'll be talking with him. And tell us a little bit about yourself, Russell. First of all, when I read it, I thought you were a professor. It said SUC, and I said, probably he's retired and maybe even passed away by this time, but you're a young man, and you were a student at the time.
Yeah, I was a student at Plattsburgh State, taking courses with Dr. Alan Everest, a noted local author and historian at Plattsburgh State. The course I happened to be taking at the time required to do a small paper. The previous summer, a family had been down to Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. We saw the Philadelphia on display. It was amazing. I grew up just south of here since I was 8 years old. Beautiful part of the lake. To see something that was really part of history so close to where you grew up is amazing. And sitting in the Smithsonian, it was the only American Revolutionary War vessel, in fact the only vessel we have dating that far back. It was utterly amazing. I wrote a small paper for a course and became very interested in the subject, wrote several more, and finally a master's thesis on naval operations here in the valley.
Well, it was a thing to do. It was right in your backyard, correct?
Definitely.
Where did you get your material for this particular 2-page article? You even mentioned what was on the gunboat when they raised it, the different utensils and so forth. You had it all.
Well, I had a lot of material from Plattsburgh State itself. They have a very good special collections. I was able to use that as well as some material from previous authors that were donated to them. Mm-hmm. We have naval documents for the American Revolution that are bound by Washington, the naval offices, and they have extracts of various letters and documents in that, as well as several journals. Mr. Hagelein's own account was there. And
who was Hagelin?
Hagelin was a salvage engineer who was involved with the raising of the Philadelphia, the original vessel, mm-hmm. and he took it on tour for quite a while, tried to give it to Vermont, tried to give it to New York, no one would take it, and I believe it was after he had died, finally the Smithsonian got around to acquiring it.
Mm-hmm. I did a little reading after I read your article. I read something in the Adirondack Life, and they talked that, I guess it was 1961, after he died, they gave it. I guess that was in your article, too. Mm-hmm. They gave it to the Smithsonian Institute, and not only is it the only American boat that's that old. It's the oldest boat that they have in the museum or anywhere in existence from North America, including Canada.
As well as South America.
And South America, okay. And can you tell us a little bit about, I read a little bit, about 54 or 57 feet long.
Mm-hmm. A oaken wooden vessel that was used from the timbers of the southern end of the lake at Skeensboro, which was an American Tory who had sawmill and other works, and that's where we gathered the lumber. It was one of the flotilla that was on the lake at the time. The vessel sailed up and down the lake, keeping an eye on the British. Notice the Valcour Bay, which is very unique. As you can see, even looking here, that the bay pretty well hides what's going on the other side.
Okay, that is Valcour Island.
That's Valcour Island right there.
And this is on what you call the bay side.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And in fact, there was one time a small community at this point in Railroad Depot, etc. But it wouldn't be until the British proceeded south of Valcour, perhaps even as far as Garden Island, which has a unique legends and lore
That little
associated.
tiny island out
the little
there?
tiny island, that they would again be able to see the American fleet. Then you would have to come about with the wind against you, try to work your way back up the lake against the wind, and attempt to engage the Americans located here.
Now, I understand in order to aim the cannon at that time, you didn't move the cannon, you moved the ship.
You move the ship
The whole
itself.
ship had to go aside.
You would anchor the vessel at fore and aft, both in front and the rear of the vessel, and you would maneuver the vessel by either raising and lowering anchors or using the sweeps, which are kind of like long oars, to attempt to position the vessel to be able to fire.
How close would they get before they would fire? As far as that first sailboat, would that be a reasonable distance
I would say,
to fight?
depending upon exactly the location of the Americans, because we're dealing with a lot of smoke, gunfire, you're dealing with vessels trying to tack against the wind, you're trying to maneuver. They would get as close as they could, but again, human error and fear does make people sometimes fire prior to when you want to.
Wait till you see the whites of their eyes?
If you waited that long, you're probably running aground, or at least running into each other.
Okay, we're located, and I forgot the full name of this. This is the Conference Center, the Valcour Conference Center.
For Plattsburgh State.
This is part of Plattsburgh State where
Yes.
we're on this property. I know that we've been to a couple weddings up here in the building. A beautiful spot on Lake Champlain, and we're, of course, on the west side of the lake. And there is the Philadelphia 2, which means that it's not the original. The original is in Smithsonian. This was rebuilt as a project in Vermont.
In Vermont, they have a maritime museum on the southern end of Vermont and on the lake, and they attempted to reconstruct. This is one of their major projects. They've been talking about it. I remember them discussing some of it in the late 70s, early 80s, discussing getting involved with this and rebuilding the Philadelphia as a living museum.
Okay, let's go down to the boat. We'll talk to a couple of people. There's at least 3 people we can talk to on the gunboat itself. And then you have a question along the way, just feel free to ask it, Russ. Then we'll get back up and talk more about your article, maybe some of the actual definite things that you've learned. Okay?
Okay.
You're watching Hometown Cable. Bob Van here, and welcome. And we're into boats this year, where we did the, I forgot the name of it here. The what?
Urger.
The Urger, when it was in Rouse's Point. That was a tugboat. This is no tugboat. That's a real fighting boat. What was it called? Either a gunboat or it was called
Gondola.
A gondola. What does a gondola mean? As far as I thought, that's what they had in when you use the
in
oars.
Venice, which you're probably remembering.
Is it because it's got oars?
In part because of it's got oars. You're dealing also, though, with a masted vessel, so you can sail as well. But again, it's because of the sweeps and the oars in part, and there are gondola, gunboat, or various names that it was used at the time. And in fact, this type of vessel was also used at the Siege of Boston.
Is that seaworthy?
As far as ocean,
I mean, you get out there too far, you're going to be...
you'd be
You're
very
underwater.
dangerous.
Yeah,
You'd be underwater. In fact, this vessel did sink in part to the damage that it took. So it would be
You're
limited.
talking about the original.
The original,
right,
obviously.
Yes.
And seaworthy on the lake. And the lake itself can be quite fierce
Yes,
if
it is.
anyone's
It's a
ever
tough
boated
lake.
into the center of the lake on even a windy day.
Okay, some of the people who are here to see the Philadelphia are here listening in the background, and they got a little story here we'll get to you later under the tent, which is what I like, when there's no sun. We'll get into that later. Thanks for watching. You can see I did not dress for the day. This guy did right here, see? And we saw him on the boat. We're going to find out who he is.
My name's Eric Tishanuk.
Eric Tishanuk, and where are you from, Eric?
I'm from Winooski, originally from St. Albans.
Is this a volunteer thing you're doing, or you work on this for the summer?
I'm a paid employee of the Maritime Museum as an education specialist. I basically stop in various ports and talk about history and life aboard the boat.
Are you dressed in the clothes of the day back in 1776, would you say?
Yeah, fairly
That's
close
about
to it, yes.
White?
White, yeah, that was pretty standard cotton or cloth linen material, and a wool waistcoat in this case. This basically would have acted as my undershirt with a overgarment, and perhaps they would have had a wool frock or other larger buckskin garment. And certainly they would have adapted from the Native Americans as their stuff began to wear out. For example, shoes were probably a luxury, and I might have reserved those for winter and perhaps worn moccasins during the summer
I was going to
months.
ask you what you would do. Moccasins, huh?
That's right.
Then would you buy moccasins in 1776? Would it be something you might throw together yourself? Or?
Probably would have been constructed of your own design or perhaps traded with the Native Americans in the area.
All right. So how long have you been with the project, Eric?
I was the first employee at the Maritime Museum some 7 years ago and have been doing the historical interpretation of the vessel for the entire construction period, some 3 to 4 years.
All right. Now, I understand that a man by the name of Art Cohen, or Kahn.
That's correct, Art Cohen.
Cohen is the director at the Maritime?
That's correct.
And his picture was in the paper. If you saw it last Friday on the 17th, there was a picture on the front page of the boat. Or did I call it a boat?
Yes,
Ship,
vessel, boat.
Vessel,
Fine.
all right.
It's a gunboat.
A gunboat. And then on the, I think it was the first page of the second section, it had Art's picture and a little bit of story about this. And I didn't know if he was going to be here. We didn't know who was going to be here. We also saw a couple other names that were on the ship that I've copied down.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, why are you in Plattsburgh here at Valcour?
Well, this is actually part of our inaugural tour. It was completed in August of last year. We did a few test runs in the fall and then set sail on our inaugural tour this year, and we're stopping everywhere. Our first stop was indeed the birthplace of the original Philadelphia down at Whitehall, New York, which was then Skenesboro. And we've been stopping both on the New York and Vermont shorelines. And stops include Ticonderoga, Crown Point, Plattsburgh. Valcour, of course, is a very important stop for us since right off our waters here is where the original Philadelphia was sunk. And we do intend as well going up into Illinois and Chambly in Canada.
Okay, now, a question on Skenesboro. I heard you say it. I was going to ask you, because I had heard that was Ticonderoga. Now, you just indicated, you didn't say that, but you indicated it might have been Whitehall, the name of Skenesboro?
Whitehall is the current name. Skenesboro was named because the village was originally named after Major Philip Skene, who was the original founder. In fact, he would have several tracts of land, and his family owned quite an extensive part of the southern end of the lake. So we're talking about South Bay, much further south than Ticonderoga.
Okay, so Whitehall was known as Skenesboro.
Yes.
Okay, all right, that's right. All right.
Ticonderoga may get confused because that's where the ships were outfitted with their various rigging and cannon. So.
Okay, well, I mean, when you take this out for a maiden voyage, first question everybody asks is, you're going to ride in it, does it leak? Did it leak when they first put it in the water?
Oh, it leaked like a sieve.
No, did it?
Yeah.
Well, of course, it has to swallow, right?
I would imagine it would be green wood if I remember some of the readings I have done.
The original vessel was entirely made of green wood and certainly would have
Here,
leaked
come
extensively.
over here, we can face the camera. But I kind of feel out of place here now. These guys are going to talk. I'll let them talk. Let them talk to each other. Go ahead, guys. Go ahead. Any questions you got? And I'll be here. I'll move the mic back and forth.
Sure.
Okay, the green wood you said, right?
Yes.
Why would you think they would want green wood?
Well, it's not a case of want, it's a case of need or what you could get at the time. You're dealing with building a fleet within a few months and a race against time. This is their original Star War race going on in the 1776. They're building a fleet in the north end of the lake up at St. John's. Of course, some of their fleets being dismantled in the St. Lawrence River Valley and being transported, but they're building their fleet there, and we're building ours down at Skenesboro. And, of course, as he was mentioning, refitted and armed at Ticonderoga, then moved up to Crown Point.
Okay, now, so this one was, now, I saw one discrepancy in my mind. The paper said this is 54 feet long. Your article said it was 57 feet long. Are we going to call it 56 and a half, or what are we going to do here?
There was probably some discrepancy in the vessels themselves originally. These things, we found no original plans of the original vessels, and they were constructed by boat builders from all over the eastern seaboard, so there must have been great discrepancy within the vessels themselves. So probably that would have been the case.
Have you had a chance to see the original down in Washington?
I have. It's indeed impressive.
Well, let me tell you, I've had all kinds of chances. I mentioned before when it was located right up here in Essex and around, and I would go by it maybe 3 times a week when I used to work in the area, and I never stopped. I was always too busy, and I'm so sorry today I didn't, because I could say that I saw it when it was here originally, you know, before it went to the Smithsonian. All right, let's talk a little bit, instead of going back right now, a little bit about this ship. Now, this is an actual cannon? Or is that a replica?
This is a replica.
Okay.
All of the items on board this vessel, with rare exception, are replicas. And in fact, the larger cannon, these are replicas of 9-pounders, that is, they fired a 9-pound shot, do not fire. However, our smaller swivel guns, which are 3/4-pounders, do fire, although we don't put live rounds in them. They frown on that these days.
Okay, now, if you remember up above, I indicated that I thought I knew that you cannot aim these guns, you have to move the ship. Or the gunboat, and these you can swivel them. They're on a swivel, and that. How big of a shot will that?
It's a 3/4-pounder, slightly smaller than a golf ball, somewhere in that ballpark.
Okay. can't do a lot of damage to a ship unless you shoot an awful lot of them.
No, more damage to individuals, I would
Oh,
say.
yeah, I guess that would do you a little bit of damage, right? If you
Yes.
ever got hit by a golf ball, you would know, and that's not the composition of a golf ball. Now, when this was shot, wasn't there an awful lot of recoil?
A tremendous amount of recoil. In fact, the whole cannon probably leapt up off the deck in addition to rolling back, and would have gone approximately 3/4 away across the width of the deck before being stopped by the retaining ropes.
Have you any idea how long it would take to, once you fired it, to get it ready to fire a second shot?
Well, that I would think depended greatly upon the crew. That is, the British were more seasoned gun operators, and the Americans were largely local militia with very little heavy artillery experience. I would anticipate it took well over a minute to reload.
Okay, well, that's not. I thought I might have even thought it longer than that, but
It's
now,
possible. I don't have an
now
accurate
that's
figure
about
on that.
6 or 8 inches thick, right? So it takes a pretty good shot to damage something like that.
Yeah, well, repeated depending upon the size of the cannon. The British are going to be using much larger metal. Their cannons are going to be bigger. He mentioned that this vessel had 9-pounders, and this one here is a 9-pounder, and I believe the one across the way is also 9. However, the superior gun is the 12-pounder in the front of the vessel.
Maybe these people, you people want to go by here and look at this closer. We'll move aside here for you. You, all right? Because you can be right on TV here. Hello there, how are you? It'll be on TV up north. You'll get a chance to see it, I guess, in Chazy.
Please go on board the vessel. Just watch your step.
Listening to the information.
You are, well, we're getting it from two authorities here. I did introduce you to Russell before, right?
Yes.
Okay, he wrote the article, and which is one of the reasons I know a little bit more than I would have otherwise. I would have come in completely cold. And, all right, you're going to be here till the 24th, I think I read.
That's correct. We're going to be here through tomorrow, or through Friday, excuse me, and then we're headed off to Plattsburgh for the Mayor's Cup, and then back down to our home port at Basin Harbor, where the Maritime Museum is located, and then back off to Kingsland Bay and Crown Point, and continuing our tour.
All right. Have you had a lot of people down to see you?
Yeah, on Sunday, in fact, we had well over 1,000 people.
You did
come
have
down.
that many.
Yes.
Make you very happy.
It
I don't want to
does.
hold you up from your customers there, but
Oh, we have
we'll take a short break. We're watching Hometown Cable, and we're at the Philadelphia, too. It was a big project, and remember, the original Philadelphia sunk in 1776, October 11th. Have I read your article good, huh?
Mm-hmm.
October 11th, and it was rose on August the 6th, 1935, by a man named Lorenzo Haglund. Colonel Lorenzo Haglund. Be right back. Bob Zen with what's going on here. We're on, of course, the dock out here. I'm wondering if there were any docks like this when this was back in 1776. They pulled up to a rock, maybe, Eric.
No, they probably did have, in fact, dock installations
They
at
did?
Ticonderoga and Crown Point both. However, the rest of the Champlain Valley was primarily a wilderness. Any dock structures that would have been made were done by small, isolated farms throughout the Champlain Valley. Other than that, the major settlements would have been the fortifications themselves.
Okay. Now, all right, my second guess, there was nothing like that in those days. There I'm right. That pontoon boat was not available at that time. They used a floating log. All right. They didn't sleep on a gunboat like this.
Absolutely, and it's kind of a hard concept as you stand before this 50-some-odd-foot vessel and imagine that the original crew consisted of 45 individuals who lived on here for 6 weeks straight, as it's recorded, through the months of September into October, and did not touch shore but on an infrequent basis for fear of Indian attack and also desertion, because it was not a popular place to be.
Desertion would be, yes, I could understand that. All right. Now, this canvas, would there have been something like this on here before? Not canvas, but was there a top on the boat?
Yeah, and in fact, it probably was canvas. The entire structure was not intact, despite the fact that the vessel was very well preserved after 150 years it stayed below the surface. There was only a couple of these supports, the stanchion posts, left, and from their original locations and the holes in the upper part of the side of the vessel, we could determine exactly where the canopy was.
It would be the canopy that would make it really worthwhile and any luxury of living.
That's it.
I mean, this is what's going to protect you from the sun, the rain, the inclement weather. So
I would have to say this, that if you didn't know your shipmates when you got on the boat, you sure knew them when you got off. 6 weeks at a time, up close and personal for sure.
course, there is one other aspect that we don't see right now, and that would be what they did go ashore at one point, was the cut fascines.
That's right.
And that would have been...
To do what?
Would you care to
Yeah,
some more?
explain me a little bit about. Watch, don't fall off because we hate to get that on camera. All right.
Just a couple days before the battle occurred, they stopped along the shoreline and cut fascine, which was basically young sapling sticks, formed them into bundles, and then attached those to the stanchion posts I just mentioned. And those would have protected them, obviously, somewhat from the elements, but more importantly, they had the British had put Indians on both the island of Valcour and on the mainland who were firing small arm fire at them continually, and would have given them some protection, at least peace of mind, from the small arms fire.
Okay. Now, if you were to fire with these 9-pounders in 1776, do you think it could reach that island?
Yes.
Could it go that far?
Yes, a range up to a mile and a half that I've heard of. Accuracy with a good British gun crew, half a mile was starting to become accurate.
But we didn't have anything
no.
like that, right?
No. Our cruise, as he already mentioned, was militia. We attempted to get some sailors from the New England. We didn't have very much luck because the bounty being paid for sailors to join the American Navy was much higher than what we could possibly offer. So most of our crews were landlubbers and a few local sailors, and that was about it.
Maybe criminals trying to get away from somebody, who knows? All right. Well, maybe we can step on board here and see what we're talking about. This person is one of the names I saw in the paper, Lenny Ruth, and you are from, let me tell you where you're from. Ticonderoga, a member of the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum. How long have you worked with the, and I didn't look at his name tag either, I did not see that. How long have you been with the?
Oh, I've been with the museum since June. I was a volunteer last year with the museum, involved in the construction and the sea trials, and now I'm a employee of the Maritime Museum.
All right.
Until October.
Now, where do you get your information? That can you answer most of the questions on here? Did you relay them to another person? You each have your own part of the story, or?
Well, basically, I've learned the history from Eric and from our exhibits at the museum.
All right. Now, let me ask you a real tough question. All right. Am I supposed to believe everything that Eric tells me? Is he going to tell me only the truth?
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right.
Oh, yeah.
He's smiling in back there. He says, "Who is this guy here asking me a question like that?" All right. And this was called what up front?
This is the this is the foredeck.
Okay, but I mean the gun itself. Is there a different name for that? I heard you mention.
It's a 12-pound cannon.
Okay. Now this can only shoot forward.
Yeah.
And if you look here, Calvin, this is a good spot to see what we were talking about with the recoil. When that is shot, it slides back, right?
Yeah, it would slide back on these tracks, and this rope would stop.
This rope would stop it. This is what stops it from going back any further. All right, and that was to ram the.
Well, this is to clean the gun. There's various tools for the big guns. This is what's called a worm. When you fired the big cannon, the first thing you do when you loaded it was load in a cloth bag filled with gunpowder.
The bag and all.
Yeah, and then ram the shot down and fire it. And then after it was fired, there was remnants of the cloth bag in the breech, and you would run this down the barrel, twist it around to catch that cloth bag and pull it out so there'd be less flammable things in the barrel when you reload it.
Before the next shot, you did that every time?
Yeah, well, you should do it every time.
You should. That's an excellent answer, you know. It's like my kid said, "Did you do that?" And he knows he should have done that. You don't always do it, though.
They frequently didn't. They
All right.
skip steps.
Yeah.
As other people are shooting at you, you would think less and less about blowing yourself off.
Right. They had many more cannon on one of their ships than we had on ours, correct?
Oh, yes.
All right. When I say ours, I don't like. Now, I assume, I'm using logic now, that those little carvings over there, those little, are for the shot.
Yeah,
That's for a 12-pound shot?
Those are shot collars, yes.
Okay. Well, now, let's face it, you want to shoot more than that. Where do you keep them? In here?
In boxes, piled on the deck, everywhere.
Right. 12-pound indicated the weight,
of the
which was about, 4 inches in diameter, 4 to 5 inches in diameter? All right.
Grapefruit.
Okay. This is the anchor over here you see that would drop off the side. And remember, you're doing all of this while you're rolling back and forth out there, right? Possibly getting seasick. Now, this is to hold the mast up, I take it, right? Okay. Up front is called the bow.
The bow.
As we face the bow, Port is on our left. All right. Oh, here we got. You're going to show us. Now this is a 12-pound.
Yeah, this is an example of a 12-pound
It's
shot.
a 12-pound cannonball.
And that incidentally was found here at the island of Valcour.
Okay, that's an authentic. Now,
Original.
this won't explode, but if it hits you, it don't have to.
Very
Of
true.
course, that's not the only type of round they would also use. They also had something called a bar shot, which was basically two smaller balls with a bar between that was used as well.
Now, would that? Why would they do a thing like that? To be what? Make a bigger hole when it would hit the.
Rigging.
Rigging.
Oh, it's with a rigging. All right. You see, they don't because that's your motor up there, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, whenever you shoot these cannons, you were anchored. I think you said you'd be anchored on the aft and bow both.
Well, at the Battle of Valcour, that happened to be the case because
Okay.
Arnold had chosen that position, and that enabled him to, as we mentioned before, turn the vessel to bring various guns to bear. Not always the case. Sometimes they had a running gun battle example 2 days later,
Right.
and obviously weren't anchored.
Yes.
But were
But now you could also just tie the back or the front or the back, and then you could kind of swing from side to side, right?
Yep, that was known as the spring system.
But while you're swinging beyond your gun, when your guns aren't aimed in the right direction, you're in trouble because he can hit you because he may not be swinging. And that's what happened, I guess, at the Battle of Plattsburgh in 1814, right? That's where they were swinging from their lines and did, which is another story sometime. But all right, we'll just thank you very much, Lenny. And anything else you want to tell me while I'm up here about this part of the boat that I have not known about? Why would you have that pin down? I mean, you got a hook there. Why? What is?
That bolt is for the tackle, for the gun. That would hold what is called in tackle. It would have a big block and tackle that runs to another block under the gun, and you would be able to haul on it to pull the gun back.
If you
to
want-
load it the first time.
Oh, you load it back here, then you shove it up here?
You load it through the muzzle, and
Oh, of course.
you would pull it.
You can't get
forward.
out there in the water and do that, right? I'm glad he was going to tell me that because I hadn't thought about that, of course. Well, once it's recoiled back, can't you do it then? Or do you have to pull it
Yeah,
back?
but the first time you would have to
All right.
pull it
Okay.
out to load it, and then there would be block and tackle on the sides
Yeah.
as there are on our waist guns, and you
Okay.
would run it back out and fire it, and then you
Okay.
wouldn't need the tackle anymore.
So while the recoil is because of the I guess you call it a recoil, it's also handy because it gives you a chance to load it before you push it back up, right? And they would oil these
Yeah,
tracks,
those
so
would
to
be
speak,
greased.
right? Greased up. Okay. I heard they also greased oars so that they wouldn't make so much noise in the water.
That's correct. And when they escaped from the British under cover of darkness, they wanted to be as quiet as possible. Although I'm sure they could make a little bit of noise since everybody was probably pretty well deaf from the day's fighting. But yeah, they greased the oar locks and patted the oars to help minimize the amount of noise that they made.
There's not much to stand behind here. It must have been a very popular post because everybody wanted to stand behind it. All right. All right, now this is where you coil up your anchor line or whatever here, your line, to dry it out during the day, right?
Yeah.
Is there any particular name for that?
Well, that's a Flemish coil. They probably wouldn't have used those back then because they were not seamen. They were militia.
All right.
They wouldn't have known how to do that. That's a very nice way to coil line because it dries fast and it can't be
Okay.
spilled when you walk through it.
All right. And what keeps you have the how much of the boat is under where we see the decking way bottom here? How much do we floating in?
There's
Float
another
over.
4 inches, and that's it.
That's
it's
it.
It's a completely flat-bottom boat.
Okay.
They built those because they were easy to build, very quick, and they also drew very little water. This boat weighs some 29 tons with their cannon and only draws 1.5 feet of water. In fact, we're only in about 3 feet of water right here, which gave her another benefit, which was to come into shallow water.
Right. The other's good now. That's a very popular part of the ship right there. One of the most popular. That's the hearth, and with the bricks, and I've heard that they found some of these bricks off here. One of the articles I read too here. All right. Anything else, Len? You want to tell me while I'm here, Lenny?
Not really.
This is where you wrap your rope around, and that's
That's
those
a
half
bit-
hitches or something that they use.
Well, that's just basically the traditional way to make a line.
Mm-hmm.
It's
All right,
easy
wrap
to
it and
take
show
off.
us here. All right. Figure 8. Look at that.
Make figure eights and then
Then you
make a
over
lock.
once and then down and over like that. Nice and neat. Remember, this is home for 6 weeks at a time right here. And look at the width of these planks, which I imagine back at that time, and they were a full 2 inches. And you're talking here 20, maybe 20 inches or more on the size of these planks. And they're very natural up here. And that's Vermont. Pine.
All this wood came from
Not pine, no, oak.
White oak,
All
actually, white
oak. That's right, the ship was oak. All right. Anything else you can think of, Russell, while we want to ask Lenny while we're up front?
Well, just that we didn't mention that there is one bit about aiming that you can do, and that's the piece of wood there, the
Here?
gun. That's used to adjust the cannon for
Up or down?
elevation, up or down. That is the
Okay.
one manner that you can aim these guns.
Okay. Yes. And then you could push this under?
Yes, if
More?
you were
Okay,
dealing
you-
with less
one,
elevation,
yeah.
if you were
Well,
not firing as great a
Okay,
distance.
so what each shot is a gauge for you for the next one,
Definitely.
right?
Absolutely.
Which is, of course, even in fairly modern warfare, was still used.
Yes. Yeah, anytime you shoot a gun, if you see that you're using the sights and using them right and it's shooting left, you just move over a little bit to the right. Right? That's common sense. All right. Anything else? Why do we have some white rope and some different kind of rope? Is that nylon or something?
Well, yeah, this is modern.
Oh, we
nylon.
can't. Okay,
use
that's
it-
modern. Okay. That
we use
belongs
it-
here. That's not yours, right?
Well, we use it for anchors and things
Right.
because they're stronger.
Okay. Were the cannon made in the United States? Or, no, they couldn't have been. Not in 1776. They weren't made within the America, were they?
If I recall correctly, we believe that the original cannon of the Philadelphia came from Sweden and made their way to the Americas from there. The cannon were absolutely precious commodity, as was exemplified by Ethan Allen taking Ticonderoga and taking those all the way to Boston, a long trip that was made by Knox. And cannon were acquired wherever they could. I'm sure they stole them from the British when they could and acquired them in any means possible.
And some of our vessels were acquired that way. The Enterprise, which was originally George III, was captured at St. John's, and some of our ordnance came from Canada. In fact, there were some British ordnance that was found, as well as some cannonballs, I think, that might have even had British symbols on them.
Was it likely that in 1776?
Best to wait when they fly over.
Well, they didn't have to contend with those noises when they were here in 1776, but as Russell said, we are still military in Clinton County and Plattsburgh area, and glad to have them part of the air base here at Plattsburgh.
Definitely.
Okay.
Our history is full of military. The War of 1812, you mentioned,
Yep.
Plattsburgh played a dominant role, and so did the Vermonters that came over
Yep.
as well and helped
Yep.
us in that.
Ethan Allen was out of Vermont, right?
Mhm.
And also the 26th Infantry, who was here at Plattsburgh for so many years at the base before the Air Force took over. All right, we'll move further on. And what I wanted to ask you was, either one of you or all three of you, was each person likely to have a musket of his own while he was on a ship like this?
Hard to say. Probably. They did carry a lot of their small arms with them. Space was very limited on board these boats, and personal belongings would have included, in fact, Lenny was making one earlier, a haversack to carry your personal belongings, a very small bag. And you talk about going away for the weekend. Well, they left for months at a time and carried a very small hand sack.
Don't tell me that airplane make this water move like this.
No, probably a pass.
Another passing vessel we didn't see. All right. We'll be right back. You're watching program, an interesting program with some nice people who know a lot about 200 years ago. These people aren't that old. No, they just read about it and they know about it. He wrote about it. He's involved with the Lake Champlain. I say he. Russell, Eric, and Lenny. They're very. And what about why would you have brown and he's got blue? Any significance to that?
Well, basically, blue was more of a military issue, and a rich person, a person with more money or standing, would have blue and
shoes.
And shoes.
Yeah. And you don't have any, right? So he's the blue blood of this ship right now, right? Is he the boss here?
Well, actually, the fellow in the back.
All
Arnold was the
right.
first
Okay, you
officer.
both answered. Okay, he's the first officer. That's what they were called, first officer?
Well, there would have been a captain on board and a first officer, and we suspect that was the only officers on board this vessel. The rest
How would they communicate from this vessel to another vessel? Did they use any kind of semaphore or anything like that at the time that you know of?
No, probably a lot of, I don't know.
A lot of hollering.
A lot of hollering, potentially using smaller vessels such as bateaus, oversized rowboats, if you had to go a substantial distance to
Go back and
communicate.
forth to each
That's
other?
Right.
Basically,
Okay.
any plans you really had to decide before the action occurred. And some lanterns were used at night. In fact, they did discuss that when Benedict Arnold greatly debated whether he proceeded again right past us here in the fog of that night to escape or went around the other side. But each vessel did have a lantern in the rear so that you could see the other vessels. So that was another means of signaling, though your messages are very limited. They did not use Morse code or anything like that.
No, you didn't give full sentences. Huh?
No.
Fred, do now. Eric, let's move. Okay, we're going to be right back. Bye. Okay, we're back, and we were talking back, and Calvin just reminded me, we didn't get very far on when you put this vessel into the water for the first time, how it was drawing water. Drawing water is what you call it? It was leaking.
It was leaking
Not drawing
substantially, and in fact, we mentioned it earlier, the swelling of the wood is an important factor. We sealed the vessel originally with strands of cotton, followed by oakum, which is a fibrous plant soaked in oils and tars, and then eventually tarred the entire boat over. We also ran a garden hose into it and flooded it for about 2 weeks. So the lower planking had swelled substantially so as not to take on as much water. Nonetheless, when we first put her in the water, she took on a lot of water and has swelled up considerably since. However, we think she's loosened up a tad from the weight of the mast. We found a little bit of a flexed planking down below. We were taking on about 100 gallons an hour, and now it's down to about 75 gallons an hour.
What he's saying is we're slowly sinking here.
That's right.
And well, how do you take it out?
We, back then, on a smaller vessel, and this is a smaller vessel for those days, they would have been using buckets, and of course the best bailer you can get is a non-swimmer. You always get them in charge.
All right. But
Of
what
course, you have 45 men to choose from as well.
Exactly.
That's right.
But what about today?
Today we have a well-concealed hand bilge and
Okay.
also a movable gasoline-powered Honda pump that we
I
use.
thought maybe you were going to tell me the visitors that come on, you give them a turn or something. huh?
The kids think the hand pump is the greatest thing, and we don't stop them either.
You know, we kid about this, but remember, this was not easy living. Just living wasn't easy in 1776, right? And I'm amazed at. But when I saw the pictures that I have seen at the Smithsonian, I don't know if I've seen the ship or not. I probably did. It didn't seem as wide as this. It's a very deceptive picture, obviously. Well, what else? Where do we go from here, Russell?
How long did it take to construct the vessel? We were talking about that before. Perhaps the viewers would like to see that as well.
Sure. Well, the original vessel had some 287 shipwrights working on it. They constructed 15 vessels, 13 vessels, 8 of which were similar to this. And over about a 13-week period, they produced those boats. Of course, there was multiple boats being built at once. We think about 3 weeks to build a boat like this. There's not a lot of good records. Us, on the other hand, had 3 full-time boat builders working only in the summertime. Of course, we had the benefit of electricity, and that took some 3 years to construct this
Took 3
vessel.
years, yeah.
We tried to finish everything with hand tools to give it more of that hand-hewn look.
Now, when you ran out of shell, and this was, I suppose, underneath that the front bow there, that's all extra shell that would be in those containers?
Yeah, we have our
I
own
shouldn't say
personal,
shells, I mean the cannonball.
The cannonballs. We have our own personal belongings down there. It's not a very dry spot because that's the first place down in the lower cockpits is where the water first comes up. So they would have had a hard time keeping things dry down there. But certainly, I believe, if I remember correctly, the original ship when it was brought up had a few powder barrels under there. So you're correct in saying that.
All right, now, when you ran out of cannonballs, of course you didn't hear, in 3 days it was gone, and the first day it was sunk. But other than that, where would you go to get replenished?
Well, you would have had to receive supplies from the farther south from here, down in the New England colonies. And the Americans were rather ingenious at using anything that was available. In fact, I even heard of a British general being knocked off his horse by a turnip. So anything that was available, rocks even worked as effective armament.
Okay.
The supplies for this vessel and the fleet as well would be transported once it reached from New England and the middle colonies up to Fort Ticonderoga, and vessels like the Liberty, which was another vessel serving, which wasn't here at the battle, was transferring supplies back and forth. So that's basically, you were dependent upon the supply line. And of course, the further up the lake you are, the longer it took you to receive supplies, as well as for them to find you.
And it's been the same for wars ever since, right? Just a little bit different. Right.
Prior and before, yes.
Right. Now, the big important thing, of course, they say armies and navies travel on their stomach. How much food could they have? Could they have enough food on here for 6 weeks? Do you know what an average menu was? I've asked the question, neither one knew, and there was no McDonald's along the way, anything like that.
It's what you carried. A lot of times it was dry food. I remember I was just reading again last night that they were having dried apples in one of the stopovers earlier in the season. They carried supplies, and again, it would be dependent on the Liberty or any other vessel to bring food supplies to them.
Yeah, like Russell says, from the accounts I've read, it was a lot of dried food, salted pork and beef, also dried peas, potatoes, and that sort of thing. And of course, having Lake Champlain and its bountiful fish supply, I'm sure they did a lot of fishing.
Right, all right. Now, of course, there's another necessity that we all know about, and they wonder where is the, as they say in the Navy, where is the head? Where was the outhouse? Where you have a toilet somewhere? And this is, I guess, was it. We'll be but this is it. And of course, they didn't have Russell Trombley and his undersheriffs going up and down the lake to protect at that time, so we knew there was not any problem with disposal. But you were very, very close to your 44 other friends, right, on the ship. All right. Is anything different with this cannon than, let's say, the one we saw up on the bow? Is this a 12-pounder or a 9? That's a 9-pound?
Both of the waist guns are 9-pounders.
Why would that be? Because it's too much recoil sideways?
No, because that was what was available.
Oh, that's a great answer. All right.
And of course, the more useful location for the best cannon would, of course, be the forward of this vessel.
Okay, let's one more time, Eric. You tell me now how we're going to load this and how we're going to fire this.
Okay.
All right.
One of the big differences, besides the size of the artillery, is the fact that this is on a naval carriage. One that was designed to roll. That one was on a greased track. This one
wooden wheels. You'll notice wooden wheels. Yes.
That's right. And the same procedure would have been done. I got a better idea. Why don't we show you how to fire one of the smaller guns, and we can run through the entire process.
Terrific. All right. Before we do that, we'll just take a short break, and we'll be right back. Well, first of all, what was in these barrels? Salt pork?
Quite possibly.
Pickles?
Yes.
Yeah.
Pickles.
All right.
Salt beef and pork.
All right. You see, also again, when we were talking about the making sure that it was lake ready, and you had to swell the wood. We have at home an old wooden washing machine that we have as a memento back from the early 1900s, and it has slats going up and down like a barrel. And my wife has to keep a container of water inside so that the moisture will keep the slats. Otherwise, it gets loose, and she can tell when it needs water because the slats get very loose. As you walk by and you touch it, it kind of rattles a little bit. And the same thing with a boat, right? You have no trouble once you're in. If it's leaking then, you got really problems. Okay, we're going to go over and see how we fire a gun. Russell, did you have
just was going to say, Eric, we could probably mention also this above us. Are these not the sweeps?
These are indeed the sweeps, and we could probably pull one out so you get a full effect of the length. They're some 20 feet long.
All right. Now, see, have you ever heard of a sweep? I think they mentioned it earlier. I got a clue of what it is because I looked down and saw the round handle on the end. And that's what they use as an oar.
Yes.
One person to an oar?
Yes.
Come on, that's 20 feet long?
Yes. You'll see they're quite effective because the top part is quite a bit heavier than the lower part. In fact, the blade is very thin, and therefore you wouldn't have quite so much drag on it. But we can show you how one of those operates as well.
When we first talked about this was Calvin's idea, and this trip he had it cut out of the paper the other day, and we said, well, we hope there's someone there to talk with us. And let me tell you something, you're making it so easy here. The three of you I've talked with so far, it's great. And I think the people out there are enjoying this show. And too bad it can't be shown while it's still here or in Plattsburgh. Where will you be? You'll be back in Burlington, right? Or back over in Essex?
A good place to catch us is at our home port at Basin Harbor outside Vergennes, Vermont. And in fact, we have a whole collection of exhibits over there, including ones on the American Revolution with artifacts from the period. So we strongly encourage people to stop by. We have boat builders building vessels there. We have a working forge. Lots of stuff to see. So stop by.
And the best of all, ask for either Lenny or Eric. They'll smile at you and tell you all about it. Okay, we are going to get an actual demonstration of a small, what do we call it? Swivel gun being fired. And it's basically the same procedure as it is with the 9 or the 12 pound cannon.
That's correct. The only
All right.
difference is that this won't recoil. This will sit right on the
Yes.
rail of the ship.
Otherwise, that man right over there is going to take a ride if he
Yeah.
does, all right? But it won't recoil. Okay. All right. Go right ahead. Tell us while you're doing this what you're doing and why.
Absolutely.
Well, the first thing I have to do is remove the vent cover, which is basically a lead cover that covers the vent hole to keep water or sparks or anything out of the breech of the gun.
Okay.
What he's going to do is put a thumb stall on it. That is, put his thumb over it to help prevent any sparks from being, when they fanned. Thank you. By putting air onto them when I put the various pieces down. The first piece I'll put down is the worm. Sort of acts like a corkscrew, as Lenny was showing you earlier with the larger one. And this is designed to remove any of the bag. All of these first implements are designed to remove anything that might create a spark while putting the charge down inside, so you don't blow yourself up.
Don't forget that while he's leaning out there, someone on the other boat over there is probably taking a shot at you.
As well as the Indians from the shoreline, too.
Yes, with their arrows and oar. All right.
We do everything twice now as a safety precaution. Certainly that wouldn't have been done back then.
And this isn't really this is not really in Philadelphia the third and the second one blew up. That's not true what I heard.
That's not true.
All right.
It's been successful. The next piece I'm going to use is the sponge, and it's basically moistened and designed to quench any sparks that are down inside. And we'll sponge the
There might be
base.
sparks in there from the last shot that you fired.
Well, in a true battle situation, almost certainly there was, because you were firing so rapidly. But we fired our last one a couple hours ago, so
Okay.
I suspect we're safe.
All
But
right.
it's still a safety precaution.
And you had this bag that you put the powder in last time, and that some of that remnants of that bag has some sparks attached to it and so forth, maybe?
Yes.
All right.
They would have used a cloth bag. We use an aluminum foil
Okay.
bag because it is.
Here.
All
The
right.
next thing we'll do is bring up the charge.
Okay.
Today we store our powder in modern shot boxes. They would have been stored in wooden ones back then, but these are safer to keep the powder dry and prevent sparks from falling onto them.
Remember, if you remember the song of the Battle of New Orleans, they had trouble keeping their powder dry, if you remember the words of the song.
Now I use the ramrod, and this is where it became particularly dangerous, because if you hadn't done the first two steps properly and you ram this down inside and fanned the sparks inside and the gunpowder went off, the ramrod went sailing out of the gun, and if you happened to be in the way, you lost what was ever in the way.
Remember, that's all wood, because you certainly can't have any metal to cause any sparks in there.
This is where we stopped being authentic, because the next thing that would have been put in was the shot.
Okay.
We're not going to do that.
The shot being either the cannonball or the... What would be the shot? What would it have been
They
here?
could have put lots of smaller ones, much like today's modern shotgun.
Like a
using
BB or a little bit bigger
a little
than a
bit
BB?
larger, probably more like musket ball size.
Okay.
Yep. In fact, they usually sometimes refer to things like grape shot.
Yes, I've
because
heard that,
of the appearance of the rounds.
Okay.
The next thing we'll do is bring up the quill. Notice we keep all the powder well away from the lit match over there.
Okay.
The quill then would have been just that, a goose quill, the feather, the hollowed feather filled with gunpowder. And he will go ahead and poke a hole down through the vent, opening up the shot.
Yeah, this will
Bag?
pierce the bag.
Okay, that pierces the
So
bag
the-
that he put in, yes?
Quill can get to it. And the
Okay.
sparks and flame can run down.
And this, remember, this is all done between every shot you take with this particular armament. Now, for anybody who's watching this on TV, there will be a report here, and I probably should cover the mic a little bit on this
Yeah.
so we don't blow...
Use your imagination.
Okay.
This is 1/10 of a pound of powder, and the larger guns, such as the bow gun, would have been using 2 pounds of powder.
All right.
So this begins to show you the mass confusion, smoke, and noise
Okay.
that were involved in battle.
Okay. You're only going to get one chance, so watch this and listen to this. So if you got to get a sandwich before he fires, you better hurry up, because we're ready for the next shot. Oh, okay. Yeah, he's...
Why is it loading cannon? There's a magnet for boats.
I'll bet.
As soon as we get the gun loaded, a boat will come into view. And it's not proper to shoot boats now. Back then, it was proper. People frown on having their boats shot.
Now, is this something you want to... Okay.
This is a linstock.
A what?
A linstock.
All right.
It's basically to shoot the gun from a distance. The rope around it is called slow match. It's basically cotton rope soaked in potassium nitrate.
And it's on right now, and it continues to stay lit.
Yeah, it
Once
glows
you're
like
once
a
you're in a
cigarette
battle.
bowl.
And you have two, so you can alternate it. Or
You would have one for each gun.
Each gun had one, and then you can use either side. I was wondering why
They would both be lit because sometimes the concussion, when it shot out, would make the linstock go out.
Okay. How long can we expect from the time you touch it to the time we hear the report?
Split
You
second.
never know.
Split second.
When you hear fire in the hole, that's your cue to cover your mic.
And remember, there's 44 other people on this boat, while the man that's firing is doing this. And you were pretty close together. We probably have, what, 12 people on here now.
Appears to be clear.
All right.
Check my range. They would have been aiming at this time. I'm
Okay.
making sure there's nothing there.
We got a boat coming up from the right.
Where? Over here?
Oh. We're having a lot of...
That's out of range.
Out of range, all right. Just your luck you'd hit him, too. All right.
Not that. Wait till the jet goes over.
Pulled up in 1935, is now at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. A great heritage.
That. Fire in the hole! Uh-oh.
Linstock clock.
No, new fuse.
Not unlike the problems that they would have faced on board the boat.
Did that on purpose to show you that it doesn't always work the first time.
Of course, in the confusion of battle, if they didn't realize that it didn't go off, they may reload another round in there, which could, of course, cause an explosion. And it did happen from time to time in battles.
Too short.
Okay,
Or at
well,
least damaged several of the crew members.
in the meantime, our prey has left the area. But we'll shoot it off anyway. We thank Lenny and Eric for putting up with our foolishness here, but we're very serious. But until we get this thing going off once, you got a longer, this time it's going to take a third of a split of a second.
Try it again. Okay. Fire in the hole!
It does go off fast, doesn't it? You don't have much time. There's no way you could do that and move back. There's just no way possible, right?
No, you touch it and it's going.
Now, at the same time that's happening, maybe that cannon there, the 9-pounder, is recoiling back about 6 feet, right?
That's right.
You kind of alternate those, I take it. And it must kind of shake your vessel up a little bit. One of those goes off and kind of rocks.
I would think so.
All right. Is there any particular area that there is what we could call a sleeping quarter, or wherever you could lay your body down?
Well, you're looking at it. The only below decks that I could possibly point out to you is right here. This is the bilge of the ship.
And you sure don't want to go down in there.
That's it.
There's company there already.
That is the bottom of the boat, right? There's 2 inches of outer planking, 4 inches of what a lot of people refer to as ribs on the boat, and then 2 inches of inner planking.
Right. Okay, so you'd find a place to lie down anywhere you could under the cover.
That's right. They must have slept in shifts because
Yeah.
I've had 45 people on this boat before, and it's absolutely packed. So they must have slept in shifts, and as we do now, or as Lenny does more correctly, he slings a hammock between the stanchion posts. Probably the more senior, yes,
Yeah.
the officers were able to do that.
Just remember that today we're in a beautiful day, a calm day, and the sun is out, and it's nice and warm. But you could have rainy weather, the wind blowing, and you got big waves out there, and it was anything but fun.
Yeah, and don't forget this was in October, and there was purportedly snow in the Adirondacks at that time, so
Well,
it obviously wasn't pleasant.
It wasn't very pleasant on this boat last night when it was 44 degrees out here. It was kind of cool.
Downsing.
All right, anybody else who's watching here have any questions you'd like Eric to answer?
Range of the gun? How far
There you go.
Range of the cannon were typically a mile and a half in that neighborhood, depending on the size of the cannon and the size of the shot. Accuracy, about a half a mile.
Yeah.
Depending on your gun drill.
The mile and a half was for 4th of July celebrations.
How many could you store? How many cannons could you store to take with you?
Cannons.
Well, or shot, or...
Shot and so forth. They brought as many as they could physically carry on the boat. simply because they knew once they were in the engagement to run out of shot is to die or surrender, one of the two. So they carried quite a bit. I can't give you an exact number. They were, perhaps Russell can give us a closer.
I can't give you either an exact number. Again, without checking the sources, maybe I can get a little better idea. But I can tell you that they used 3/4 of the rounds that were brought. In fact, that was one of the reasons Arnold decided to retreat during the night and go away. If you one battle, you've lost 3/4 of your ammunition, you're not in any shape to continue fighting.
Remember, this battle started on October 11th,
Yes.
and this ship was sunk on October 11th.
Yes.
It didn't have to worry about the next day whatsoever, right? And the battle went on from the 11th to the 13th, correct?
That is
That included the running away and going down and being chased by the British.
That was a strategic. That was a strategic retreat, not running away.
If I'd have been on the ship, I'd have been running. But it was a strategic retreat. They were trying to save their vessels for the next battle, right?
That's
All
right.
right, Eric. He's been trained well. See, Art Cohn, right?
That's
The executive director of the Maritime is the one who taught you those words, right? Did he say it right, Lenny? He said it exactly right. All right. Thank you very much for tuning in to Hometown Cable. Bob Van here with the mic, Calvin Castine with the camera, Eric, Lenny, and Russell here. This is Russell Doyle Jr. He wrote this article. We're going to hear more about his article a little bit later in the program. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, they're now that they fired the gun, they're going to have to clean it. This is what they would do. They just dropped it in the water. The residue that was holding the gunpowder just came out and it fell into the water, which is a good place for it. And then they've got to secure it so it doesn't keep swinging around. The battle's over and we won, by the way.
Sponge the piece.
Now, when you sponge this, that means that the next time, well, of course it wouldn't be. The next time you still have to do this all over again.
That's
Yes.
right.
You would automatically.
We do for safety's sake.
Okay.
They would probably keep they would be still firing in battle, and after the battle, after they secured the piece,
Piece is sponged.
Okay.
you may not know if somebody else gets a different gun, you may not know if it was secured.
Okay.
So you never know if there's going to be something in the gun or not.
Okay, that's the cap to stop any...
Any sparks or
Sparks or
water. They
anything.
would have kept their swivel guns and probably all their guns loaded back then.
All right, now we're going to see one of the... I can't even say it now. Sweep. This is a sweep you're going to see. And Eric is pulling out the top where it was stored. And this is what we would call an oar if you were in a boat today, or a canoe. But of course, look at the size of this. And I suppose you each had your own. We won't help him because he didn't get any help back in 1776.
As I mentioned before, the majority of the weight of the sweep is up near the end, which I'm pulling on. And the reason for that is because the majority of the oar is actually stuck out over, so it acts as a nice counterbalance. And despite the weight of the sweep, it's actually quite light now on this end. Tapered to a handle. Also notice that the sweep is not like a canoe paddle. It's much smaller because there's just too much resistance provided by this boat. But when we do have 12 people rowing on the boat, it works quite efficiently. And in fact, I'm standing backwards. You'd be standing this way.
All right.
And that's basically the way it works.
Now, you lift it out of the water to go back and grab the next stroke?
That's right.
All right.
That's the standard rowboat. Same,
All right.
same
My,
idea.
one of my first questions would be, why wouldn't you have more of a handle on? That doesn't seem to give you, I mean, you only got about 12, 14 inches. Any particular reason?
Plenty for one
Plenty
person.
for one person
Yeah.
to hang on to it. Huh? And one person, and you had them alternating about every 3 or 4 feet?
Yeah, about every 5 feet or so.
And you had to, well, who kept you in the right cadence that you all did it at the same time?
Lenny, who keeps you guys in cadence?
Well, whoever has this oar right here, the port, we don't usually use the aftermost oars. We use whoever is the port aftermost oar is called the stroke oar, or the coxswain.
Okay.
And he would keep the pace, and everybody would follow the person in front of them, and they would all, and this person would be following this person, and they would all just follow the person in front of them.
Is it true, Lenny, that if everybody clapped, you take us for a little ride with these, when you're going to do it by hand?
Well,
Oh, not too likely, huh? Okay. Now, these get very hot, obviously, when you've been firing a few times. Is that correct?
they would.
Yes,
And,
it does.
and you'd have some kind of a glove or a piece of leather to wrap around your hands at the time?
They would have probably not had gloves. They would have just had a thumb piece
Okay.
to do the thumb style piece, and the person working the muzzle would suffer. They were
Okay.
expendable.
Yeah. Yes. Unless they were good oarsmen, then they didn't have to fire. Right. Were there certain people only who fired the cannon out of the 44 people?
Oh, absolutely. Luckily, the payroll was found of the original Philadelphia, so we know the number of crew members, and it also had their jobs listed, and everybody had a very specific job that they were expected to do. Anybody with gunner experience was obviously put right onto a gun crew.
Do you know, Russell, how many were killed during that battle that day when just before it was sunk? Any idea of the number of?
I know there were more American casualties than British, but without checking exact data, I wouldn't be able to give any real.
The Philadelphia, about a third of the crew was killed or wounded.
The Philadelphia, a
That's
third.
correct.
All right. Now, show us what this. Well, you want to put that back inside here so you won't have to hold this.
Oh, it stays.
All right.
Water skiing. No water skiing, no.
What about your rudder back here? How did that work?
Same way a modern sailboat works. It's a tiller bar rather than a ship's wheel because the rudder is small enough to be able to use.
All right.
You can look at the rudder with that.
Okay, he's looking over. Calvin's trying to get a shot over the side, and you can see that now you're either being moved by one of two, of course, and we're aft in the ship. We're really going the other direction. So if you think he was pushing the oar the wrong way, it's not really true because we're going in the other direction.
That's right. We're in the back of the ship.
We're not
now.
backing up. This is the back of the ship, and this was storage under here, as far as you knew.
Yeah,
that was
those
a storage.
are shot boxes.
Shot boxes
And
also.
Some of the interesting things that we found on the original vessel that we duplicated, which were actually mistakes, include the holes for the deck beams. In other words, there was beams that went across here, a deck laid on top, and this would have been designed to have another cannon on the back. Now, when they got to Ticonderoga, they either figured out that they weren't able to put a cannon here or didn't have the cannon, and thus lowered the deck down.
I was going to ask you what those were for. It was to put the ribs across to put another deck up here.
That's correct. And these are shot boxes.
All right, maybe anybody out there got any questions you want to know from these two gentlemen? You can be on TV while you're at it. Any questions that you want to know?
How many men were aboard?
45 individuals for a 6-week stretch.
Good friends. When you got off.
Probably not, in actuality. Discipline was a major issue as well.
I'm sure.
They're not dealing with today where you're going to get reprimand or the guardhouse. Of course, there is no guardhouse in this case. Whippings were done, and other discipline as well.
Mm-hmm.
No whips for us, no.
Well,
No whips,
actually, we have a cat.
You do have one here? Well, why don't you show us what a cat at nine tails looks like?
Well, it's our representation.
It's one you made up yourself? One that your mother loaned you?
Yeah, I'm not sure where it is.
Oh, there we are.
This is similar to what they would have used, except the ends would have probably been metal.
Metal.
Much more damage can be done with metal bits.
Well, you don't want to hurt them too much. You want them to work the next day.
Well, yes and no. You want to make sure that they're not going to make the same mistakes again, and even the British Navy had a very stern code of discipline.
Well, let me ask you now, why 9? Why wouldn't 8 do just as much? Or 10 do more?
I'm not sure of the origin
All
of
right.
the cat of nine
There has to be a
tails.
reason. I guess maybe it's a...
Well, the way this one was made, there's 3 strands to a
Wait,
rope.
why don't you show these people also here? Maybe you can just...
There's three strands to a rope, and we just made 3 in each
Right.
strand.
But I think there were 9 and supposedly along
Yeah,
the way too.
so-
Yes, there were.
9 works out as
Yep.
a perfectly even number, and
Yeah.
it
Wow.
looks symmetrical.
Known as a cat of nine tails. And
Right.
Cats have 9 lives.
9 lives. There you go. All right.
That would
Uh,
seem logical. Seems,
Does that piece of wood that's all notched mean anything, by the way?
Those are going to be racks for the gun tools that will be mounted up here.
This is what the captain wore. This the captain's...
No, it's not. He would have had a tricorn.
Oh,
That-
gosh.
that
Well,
was a
whose
more
was
common
this?
militia.
That's mine.
This is yours. Well, why don't you wear this and I could get rid of it? There, see what you look like. See what I look like just now. Oh, yeah, you look better. Yeah, there you go. Hey, of course, it was, had a reason it kept that sun off. It got pretty hot out
Yeah.
here. And,
Militia, an officer, a soldier, would have at least one side of their hat turned up for when they fired their flintlock. It wouldn't catch on fire.
Okay. Hi, guys. You got any questions you want to ask these guys here? Huh?
I like the sunshade.
Where are you from? Are you from Plattsburgh? Huh? What's your name?
Adam.
Adam who?
I'm not from Plattsburgh.
Adam Stone. All
I'm
right.
not from Plattsburgh.
Are you mad you're not from Plattsburgh?
No, I'm from Peru.
Peru, New York? That's a long way. Listen, do you pick apples in the fall? No? Well, listen, what is your name?
Jonathan Reed.
Reed? Oh, that's a nice name. So you guys, this is the first time you've ever been on an old boat like this? This is very historic, you know. You're in a real fighting ship. There were 40. If you'd have been on here back here 200 years ago, there had been 42 other people plus yourself. You could have had 4 or 5 baseball games going all at the same time. Okay. We'll be right back. You're watching Hometown Cable, and we're on the Philadelphia 2.
They had 8 swivel guns. Well, there were places for 8. There were 1 found when it was raised. But they must have had more than 1.
As it was sinking, another ship, the Washington, came up alongside, and it's speculated that they either removed the swivel guns at that time to use later, or they just never got the full accompaniment of swivel guns, although had brackets for 8. We're not sure.
No.
Plus,
there's also the account that says an hour after the battle that the vessel sunk, and others, with the evidence, seems that looks like it sunk very quickly. So there's a little bit combination of the two.
Yeah.
Okay, now a question came up here while we were off camera. Why 44 or 45 men? Why not 34? Why not 40? Any idea what 45 men were doing on this ship?
Well, yeah, we have a good idea. The cannon, as we've gone over extensively, took a lot of men to operate. They would
2
have
each?
2 for the swivel guns. The larger guns, anywhere from 7 to 10 individuals on those.
On one cannon?
Sure, you had to pull the whole thing forward again, and it weighs over a ton apiece on
All
those
right,
things.
okay.
So they had to pull those back, and it took an extensive crew. So there you had 30 guys wrapped up in armaments,
Yeah.
which left you 15 to maneuver the vessel. What were you doing other time was the question. Well, just as Lenny said he was making racks for gun implements, you were always busy on board a ship, be it repairing sail or making grommets for the canvas covers. As we keep ourselves busy on board the boat, certainly they would have done the same.
You had, I believe, anywhere from 12 to 14 sweeps, so maneuvering the vessels, you have those 14 men busy. You have at least 1 man on the tiller. When you were using the sails, you're going to have several men, one up at least on the mast, and several other men busy putting the sail up and down. You're also talking about a number of the complement were Marines as well, people that would be some skill with sharpshooting and whose job would be doing that.
Mm-hmm. Now, I read somewhere that the Philadelphia, I believe the Philadelphia, did very well with the wind or across the wind, but could not go against the wind.
That's absolutely true.
But can you tell me why? But sailboats can go against the wind, but
That's right, but they have keels, and as I mentioned before, this was built as a flat-bottom vessel and has absolutely no keel to it. There's no lee boards, there's no centerboard or anything. When I showed you the bilge, that was the bottom of the boat. Therefore, she does not sail into the wind at all, only when the wind's at her back, and you can't even row into the wind with a vessel of this size. Although we have rowed against a couple knot wind, but it was a lot of work. So.
all right. You mentioned the word keel. There's some people out there who are watching that don't know what a keel is. That's that pointed. It's like a roof of a house upside down.
Exactly.
Is that all right?
That's
the
a
keel?
great way to explain it. In fact, the whole boat is sort of like an upside-down house. Houses keep the water from going on your head, while a boat stops water from coming in. So same
Okay,
idea.
same type of thing. All right. And of course, it gave it strength too, probably.
Yeah.
That
well,
way?
yeah, absolutely.
All right. And it gave you room to catch more water before you sink when you're taking it in at 100 gallons an hour or whatever you said.
That's right.
All right. Calvin's looking up on top of the, what do you call this up here? Deck? No, you can't call that a deck. What do you call the roof?
Awning,
Roof.
yeah.
Awning. All right. Now, that awning would have been made of what at that time?
Probably
Wood?
canvas.
Canvas?
Yeah.
They had canvas back then, all right?
Just canvas
Of course, you had to have canvas sails, of course. All right. And you needed some experienced people with riggings for canvas.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
The sails were purportedly made in Poughkeepsie.
All right, we're just about finished our tour here on the boat. We have another person we have not met yet. Correct?
Right.
Anything else you want to mention to us, Eric or Lenny, that we didn't think about to ask you while we're on your vessel?
No, I can't think of a whole lot other than that we'd like to encourage people to stop by and see us. Please come down, and we'll be happy to talk some more about history.
Well,
and,
you'll
bring
probably be
everybody.
gone by the time this boat may not show for a while.
We hope if we are able to raise enough money that we will be able to get out on the lake. This is largely funded by membership program where people can give anywhere from $5 to as much as they want to give. So we're dependent highly upon public donations, and that our tour next year will depend upon that. If not, you'll find us at Basin Harbor at the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum.
That's over in near Shelburne.
No, that is outside Virgins, Vermont.
Virgins, Vermont.
That's correct.
The biggest, or the smallest city in the United States. Is that what they call it?
That's
smallest city in the United States. See, we have to know all these things. Now, because I knew that an upside-down roof looks like a keel, you give any prizes or anything like that to these people that come in and know these things?
Do we give them anything, Lenny?
Well, you gave me a shot a few minutes ago. All right.
Go.
Thanks very much, Eric, for talking with us.
Thank you.
And Russell and Lenny, thanks very much for putting up with us. And we've enjoyed this tour, and there's one more person we haven't met, and we're going to go up and check some signs that are up next to where we first came on the vessel, and maybe we'll get some printed matter. And if you have any questions at any time, check with the Maritime over there in Vermont. It's a very interesting trip we had today. It's been fun, plus interesting, and very knowledgeable. And Russell, you've added so much to it too, because you've added those things that you've gone into, and these boys have added what they've been told, what you have studied and learned, and yours was maybe more modern in the sense that you've done this report for college, and it got you through and got you this lifetime job. Thank you very much. Okay, as we mentioned, of course, or Eric mentioned, there's water in the bottom of the boat. This is the bilge pump that works by hand like that, and water comes out of this hose that goes up and shoots out right over there. You see, as he's working, you're taking the water out.
A more modern convenience that they didn't have.
Yes. I'm sure they had to have the bucket, then you have to wait till it gets deep enough to be able to pick it up.
They probably did have a bilge system like I showed you earlier.
Okay, where you can catch it.
Knowing what you're doing is a real relative term.
I think you see his name. It's Arnold. Someone said Arnold Lob. I never heard the name Arnold before. Is a derivation of Arnold?
No, it's actually just a Hawaiian name.
Okay,
so.
Hawaiian name. All right. And you are wearing green. What does that mean? You're in charge?
Not necessarily. It's just the color waistcoat I was issued.
Okay.
But I am first mate on board, which just principally means I'm one man below the captain.
All right.
And he just, when he wants to do an evolution, like raise a sail or set a sail, he'll tell me to do that. That's what he wants done.
Okay.
And then I delegate the hands to the different ropes.
There's only one first mate?
Yeah.
There's a second mate and a third mate and so forth?
Yeah, on big ships, on commercial ships, they would have had the first mate, second mate, third mate. On ships of war, they would have had first lieutenant, would have been the equivalent of a first mate, and then you had the master's mate, who was like the second mate. And they had different military ranks involved.
All right. So under you on this ship, say, would be somebody in the gunnery, someone with the oars, that each would have a leader of that group?
Yeah, pretty much.
You would talk to us, I want your men to do this?
Pretty
basically?
much, yeah. I'm pretty much mainly just for the sailing, though,
I
on this
understand. Okay.
vessel.
All right, so that if it's sailing, you'd be in charge of sailing.
Uh-huh.
All right. How long have you been with the Maritime?
For 3 years. This is my third year. I was a volunteer for 2 years during the construction of this. This year I became.
Is this a year-round, or it's mostly in the summer?
It's just a summer job. The museum is seasonal, and as you can imagine, you can only really go around the lake during the summer.
What do you do the rest of the year?
I'm still a student.
Where, at University of Vermont? Or?
Yeah, I just graduated from high school, and I'll be a freshman there this fall.
Just from high school, you look older than what you are, I guess. Oh, okay, so you're just starting to go to UVM? It'll be your first year.
Yeah.
All right. And can you tell us, first of all, what we're looking at here and what happens on a sail? This is called?
That's the mast.
The mast.
The main mast.
M-A-S-T, all right? And across?
And on the top, you see this whole bundle tied up there. On the top, it's called a yard. It's like the big stick. On this lower bundle of sail and yards, you have the yard, and then you have the sail, which you can see, and then underneath the sail you have the boom. And
now wait, I don't think I understand.
Okay.
The top one is the yard. We're still
we're looking at the first
one.
The
all
first
right.
bundle of sail and wood you see there.
Yes.
You have two sticks, so to speak.
There are two. I beg your pardon. I only saw one. Okay.
The one on top is called the yard.
Right.
And then you have the sail, and then you have the boom, the stick on the bottom.
And the boom comes down?
On this rig, everything comes down. On the other side of the mast here, you have it's called the main tie, right here, which lowers lowers the mast, the boom, the yard, and the sail right down to the deck.
And then you raise it afterward.
Exactly. Then you can cast off the gaskets and unfurl it and raise it up.
How many people does it take to do that?
Usually two.
Two to bring it up and down. So you drop the whole thing down here.
Yep.
And then one stays here. You fasten it?
You don't fasten it down. The boom, once you raise it, the boom it gets lifted with the fill of the sail.
All right.
It's controlled by sheets, which go aft,
okay,
and the tacks, which go forward. These lines you see going forward are the tacks.
And now, once you're sailing, do they have to have somebody each one of these lines to control them?
Only when you want to go through an evolution, which is to change direction, if you're going to tack or if you're going to jibe, if you're going to change direction with the wind, change your angle with the wind, then you need people to haul on the lines. But otherwise, you just make them fast.
So what are all, there's 4 different lines here coming down. What do they do?
This is the lift. These here are the lifts. You have your port and starboard lifts, and these control the up and down levelness of the yard.
Okay.
So when you pull on one, it raises. You pull on this one, it raises the starboard side.
You wouldn't want to keep it straight all the time?
You would.
You would.
And that's what the purpose of this is, to keep it,
okay,
make
to
sure
control
it
it. All right.
as you drop
and
it.
This is a ladder that you would use to climb up right here?
Yeah, it's called the ratlins.
The ratlins?
Uh-huh.
All right. And why would you go up there?
That's if you want to set the topsail, the smaller bundle of sail.
And that don't come down. That's what you have to go up there to do that.
Correct. You have to
that
send
becomes
it to
another
that
deck, so to speak, that you have to bring down like you did here.
You don't bring it down. The men stand on. You can see it's sort of like a crow's nest, so to speak. It's actually called a trestle tree.
Right.
The structure there, and that allows 2 crew members to stand on that while they're setting the topsail.
All right. How do you spell topsail? T-O-P-S-A-I-L?
Yeah, well, it's topsail.
But you call it topsail.
Topsail, yeah.
All right. And have you any idea out of 44 people that were on this boat, how many it would take to do this, and how many? Because they certainly all couldn't do it.
We found that the minimum number that you can comfortably do an evolution with sail is 12. Mainly because there's just so many lines. Not so much. There's not a lot of strain on any of the lines, but there's just lines everywhere. So about 12 is what it takes comfortably to go through an evolution.
So the oarsmen would not be used very often, would they, in a ship like this?
Yeah.
The wind, maybe.
Well, this only really sails downwind.
Right.
So if you want to get from a protected harbor out into the wind, you would have had to row. If there was no wind at all, you'd have to row. Or if there was a little bit of wind coming right against you, then you'd also have to row.
So if you're going for a trip to visit someone that day, in order to come home, you're going to have to do a lot of oaring.
Pretty much, yeah. If there's too much wind, you can't row. It's just too heavy of a vessel to row into.
And there's no way you can use the sails to come back up.
Not into the wind, no.
Not with these, because of the flat bottom.
The flat bottom, also the design. The design of this square rig, you can't brace the yards around any more than like 45 degrees, which means you can't even get your sail area at enough of an angle to go into the wind.
So one of the main things that any ship would shoot at, rather than the captain or the first mate, would be that mast right there.
It depends on who you're fighting. If you're fighting the French or the Spanish, they like to blow away your mast, destroy your rigging, and knock your rig down and preserve the hull. Because they didn't have a lot of good ships, and hopefully they'd be able to capture the ship. If you're fighting the British, they had the most ships and the best ships in the world, so they just wanted to sink your boat, so they'd mainly shoot at the hull.
I'd rather fight the French, right? I could go to work for them after they sink my ship.
But in any case, they'd be shooting at the crew on both sides.
All right.
Together.
Now, as first mate, how come you don't have shoes like this other guy here that's got shoes? I would think first mate should have the best shoes on the ship.
Well, actually, being a sailor, you usually prefer not to wear shoes. It's a lot safer. You get better traction. You can climb ropes better and go up ratlins and such.
But doesn't oak give slivers once in a while? No?
It's hard. It's worn down. Once you oil it, it kind of becomes, it's like a dance floor almost. So.
Okay. You probably slide like on a dance floor, too, at times.
Yeah, but get used to it.
Okay. This is not the type of a ship that you would ever board another ship and have a fight between sailors.
Not necessarily, no. It's one of the reasons it's so low. Yeah. It was designed just to carry guns and not to be. I mean, if you pull up against an ocean-going ship, their gunnel is going to be way over your head, and it's going to be hell, murder trying to get
gunnel. What's a gunnel?
That's the whale. It's pretty much the top of your hull.
Okay. All right. Anything else you'd like to tell me? I'm just out of questions.
Not much.
You enjoy this?
Everything. Oh, yeah, it's great.
You enjoy these people asking you questions like this? They're all going to ask you questions? You get a lot of the same questions?
Oh, yeah.
What's the favorite question? How many men were on this boat?
Pretty much, yeah.
Right.
How many men are on the boat? Everybody has to ask about the cannons, whether they're real cannons.
Okay.
The anchor gets a lot of attention because it looks so authentic.
I suppose you'd like to have a dog on here, but with 45 people, you didn't have room.
No, and they probably would have ate the dog after everything else went sour.
Right. That happens, too.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you very much for talking to us, and good luck at college.
Thanks.
What are you going to major in?
No idea.
No idea. That's typical, though.
Yeah,
Typical.
it's a pretty popular major.
We'll ask you in 4 years. Thank you very much. Kind of doing this a little bit backward. I should have stopped and talked to this lady when I first came in, because she's the receptionist when you first arrive, and she gives you literature, and she tells you maybe why you're here. What's your name, please?
My name is Gwen Tishnook.
Gwen Tish.
Yes, there is a
Are you Eric's sister?
His wife.
His wife, of
Yes.
course. Oh, he was great to us out there. He was
Great.
great. Well, I'm so glad to have stopped and talked to you. Gwen.
Yes.
All right. You took me for a loop there. I said, golly, that's because I've never heard the last name before like that. And what do you do here now?
Well, I coordinate the sales end of the tour, and I travel with the boat via the land and carry the literature and sell some proceeds that help support the tour.
Sales and, you say?
The sales end, yes.
What are you selling?
We sell T-shirts, sweatshirts, and some
all
small
right.
souvenirs.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you do this 1 day a week, 2 days a week, or are you
This
also...
is a full-time job for me
You're
during
at the Maritime
summer.
also?
Yes. Yes.
For the summer. Are you both going to college, or...?
Well, I have just recently returned to college, so yes, I am.
Okay. And so you are selling, and anybody that wants something like that, you got shirts, you said, and T-shirts, and heavier shirts here?
The sweatshirts.
Sweatshirts?
And we also have some postcards and things, and all of the proceeds help support the tour.
Okay. And you hand out the literature here that says Explore Lake Champlain Maritime Museum, Virgins, Vermont. And they hand out a little pamphlet here that says the Philadelphia 2, or Roman numeral crew, whatever. And then there's a paper here that's been giving out the Maritime Museum. We know a little bit about the Maritime Museum from what we read in our Clinton County Historical Association's paper. We see that, and we've seen Mr. Cohen's name, Cohen.
Cohen. Yes.
He's been over here before. He was over here in October, I think it was 87, something, when they had a meeting, and he was talking about the Maritimes. And so you travel wherever Eric goes, you go. Isn't that nice?
Well, actually, it's wherever the boat goes. I
Oh,
go,
okay.
yes.
Well, but Eric goes with you, too.
On occasion.
Okay.
We're lucky enough to have him along.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, do you sleep on the boat?
I have in the past, but we're lucky enough to have some beds provided for us graciously by by SUNY Plattsburgh and here at the Valcour Conference Center this time. So
And you call home Burlington, or...
I can call my home Burlington, yes.
Okay. Anything else you want to tell me, what you're doing here, or how long have you been doing this? You said this is your first year?
This is my first season with the museum, and it's been a wonderful experience to be able to meet a lot of new people, a lot of new faces.
You got a nice building here. You know what this building was before?
My understanding is this was the boathouse,
Wow.
and that the front of the building, there's actually hinges that used to open up gates, and you could bring your boat right in.
Is it locked, do you know?
It is not locked.
It is not locked?
It is not locked, and you're welcome to go inside.
We could go and maybe get a picture inside after. Oh, you look at this guy. See, I was over here. He's been on the boat all day long. He never left the boat. I come over and talk to the lady, and he shows up. See that? He knows I was talking to the lady, so he came over. When I noticed that last name, I thought it was your sister. She corrected me very quickly. All right. Maybe we'll take a look inside if you don't mind.
Wonderful.
Thank you
Please
very
do.
much for talking to us.
You're very welcome.
What I'm holding in my hand is what caused me to meet this nice gentleman on my right, who was very kind to come and meet us here today. It's called the North Country Notes, issued monthly, except during the summer, by the Clinton County Historical Association. And they give their various things in the front. And inside, they usually have a full page or 2 pages about a certain topic. And this was the Philadelphia, 1776 to 1975, by Russell T. Doyle, Jr., SUC. And I checked the phone book, and sure enough, there was a name like that in the phone book. Tell us a little bit about it, and give us something about, maybe you could read some of the parts that you think are important in there. Well, they're all important, but I mean, we've got about 8 minutes. Some of the things that were found and how it was brought up or whatever.
Okay, the article, as I said, is based on a lot of research. I looked at journals, letters from different people. I examined the various documents. I read Hagelin's own description in his material that he wrote on the recovery of the vessel. History is kind of looking in the past, but we can't, like looking out a window, see a clear view of it. we are kind of relying on other people's view of what we see. It's kind of like someone describing to us what's outside that window. Only with tools like archaeology do we get a frozen moment. We were talking at the end towards the about the vessel and why it sank. We didn't get that, I don't believe, on camera.
Okay.
And perhaps that might be one area that we could discuss. When they first examined the vessel, they noticed that there was a cannon shot, a bar shot that we did discuss earlier, still in the barrel of the cannon. There were holes at the deck just above the waterline, so the vessel evidently was still on the surface at that point. They ran the cannon back, reloaded it, put the bar shot in. You have the crew there. At the same time, they were preparing to leave. They raised the anchor. They ran the cannon back out. Eric was mentioning that raising or bringing the cannon in back and forth did lower or raise the actual waterline. When they brought the cannon back forward with the anchor raised, the crew standing there, the weight of all that dropped the hull below the waterline. That then commenced to take on more water, as we saw that it's always taking water.
Right.
The rate of increase was beyond what the crew could bail. Okay. They then abandoned ship.
Once you got below the water and water came in, there was no matter how much you moved, you couldn't bring it back above water,
no,
right?
At that point, it was irretrievably lost.
Right.
You only had a matter of time. How much time, we don't know. Documentation, we don't have eyewitness reports. We don't have someone with a video camera taping it. So a lot of material is, if we're lucky, we get a letter or a journal entry, sometimes years later. So, of course, sometimes we wonder whether it's accurate or not.
Right.
But in this case, we had the vessel sitting on the bottom, well preserved. Lake Champlain offers a unique advantage. We don't have Toledo worms. We don't have a environment that destroys the wood. The wood was fairly protected in a sandy base.
What kind of worms?
Toledo worms, and again, this is something in my own research. It's a worm that's found in saltwater environments that eats wood. It's kind of like a termite underwater.
So that they could have eaten this if it had been where there's salt water or whatever.
And it would have been destroyed.
Okay.
But thanks to the environment and being in a fairly protected bay, protected from the storms, sandy environment, again protected the vessel. The brief view we've got of it, because of archaeology, is that few seconds just before the ship sank, the raising of the anchor, putting the shot in place in the cannon, the type of shot was used, and why it sank. Of course, it probably would have been scuttled anyway. They did retreat, as we talked about earlier, and several vessels were scuttled at Schuyler Island because they weren't seaworthy. We lost.
Scuttle means to sink it so that they can't get it, right?
So that the British would not have the advantage.
Right.
Several more vessels continue on the retreat. We saw Garden Island that we talked about very briefly. There's a legend that talks about it as Gunboat Island, that the British, that island or another like it, was fired on by the British thinking it was American vessels until the fog lifted, giving the Americans more time. Again, a legend.
All right, now read some of those. There's a place in here right in the beginning what they found. I had 4 tons, right? I think it's on that first side.
Are you referring to what was found aboard the ship?
Yes, okay.
2 anchors were found, the port one being the smaller. Some of the other findings were benches, 2 chests large enough to contain a man, a china cup, medicine bottle, hourglass, shoes and buckles, a wooden gauge for the 9 and 12 pound shots. Additionally, they found some of the small cannon, and the fact that one of the swivel guns, in fact, they didn't mention, was actually a small cannon. Some of my research pointed out that the swivel guns really were not that available. Again, scarcity was one of our problems during this time period. So they mounted very small cannons of the same caliber, same gauge of round size.
All right, what we've got is about 2 minutes to go, and we've finished our tape here, and we usually don't cut, but we've got 2 full hours on here. Anything else you want to tell me in closing that we have not heard about, or anything else about this project?
The projects like this are important. It's living history. Sometimes it's hard for people to see things reading it in a book. When you see it in real life, like I saw it in the Smithsonian, the original, it tends to inspire people and maybe turn someone on to history, or at least make something a little bit more understandable. You saw people's eyes as they popped, as they saw 45 men living aboard that vessel.
Yes, absolutely. Russell T. Doyle, Jr., he wrote the article for the Historical Society. Because of that, I had a chance to know who he was. I talked to him. Thank you very much for taking your time to come down and meet us. We're in the boathouse at the Valcour
educational
conference building area. And you're watching Hometown Cable. It's called What's Going On Here? Bob Venn saying thank you very much for watching, and please watch every Sunday night, and watch every night for all the programs put on by Calvin Castine with the camera, who's on and covering everything in the North Country. Thanks for watching.
Is there anything important that should be covered, though?
I think we've pretty well covered everything. Just,
okay.
Except for me saying thank you.
All right, well, it's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
And the biggest thing was like calling him 11 o'clock last night to be here within 12 hours, and he made it. Thanks very much.
My pleasure.
I do want to point out that we wanted to try to get Ed Trombley here.
Yes, we wanted to get Ed Trombley, and he's not feeling well. Is that correct, Alvin, you said? And we wanted to get him because he's a historian from up north that would have known something about this. He likes the boats and so forth, and we couldn't get him, and we didn't know if we were going to see anybody on the boat whatsoever. We had no idea what we were going to see. And after reading this article, I said, I got to see the author of that. And he knows what he's talking about and could probably help us out, and you certainly have. You helped me down there with the questions. You helped a lot with the answers, too.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you very much.